The special favor of Allah, Awliya Allah. The universe is the body and its soul, Awliya Allah, Awliya Allah.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen. Amma ba'd, fa'awudhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulallah, wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah. As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Nabiyallah, wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nurallah. Viewers of Madani Channel, welcome to this special program, Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow. And in this program we look at our past, we look at the rich heritage of Islam, we look to our past, look at the rich heritage, the role models that we have of the past, learn from their lives of yesterday so that we can make a change today, so that we can have a better tomorrow. But before we begin, we're going to give you a blessing of reciting Durood Pak upon the Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. It is narrated that Sayyidina Abu Darda radiyallahu ta'ala said that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam is reported to have said that the one who recites salat upon me 10 times in the morning and 10 times in the evening. Allahu Akbar. How hard is that? Before I give you the blessing, how hard is it to 10 in the morning and 10 in the evening? How long does it take? Allahu Akbar. But listen to the reward that you will get if you recite 10 Durood Pak upon the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the morning, 10 in the evening. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he will be granted my intercession on the day of judgment. Allahu Akbar. What greater gift can we have, my viewers of Madani Channel? And inshallah azza wa jal, we're going to talk, like I said, about the great companion of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the great lover of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we're going to learn a little bit about how he loved, because you've heard it many times on Madani Channel that part of our iman is to love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But how? How are we to express that love? How are we to show that love? What is the criterion that we should try and follow to see that do we really love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And today we're going to talk about the greatest lover of all. The greatest lover of all, none other than Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala. Now before we go on to give you some examples of the love that he had for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to him. Because unfortunately, as Muslims, even these great personalities of the past, we will know very little about. And I know it's going off the topic, but that's something that we need to think about. That what do we know about these great people? This respected name of the first Khalifa of Islam, yes, he was the first Khalifa of Islam, the leader of the believers, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala. His name is Abdullah. His kunya is Abu Bakr, and the titles that he was given were Siddique and Atiq. The meaning of Siddique is the one who speaks the truth. He was referred to by this title even before, during the period of ignorance, because he always spoke the truth. And the meaning of Atiq is freed. Giving him the glad tidings, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, you are the one who is freed from the fire of hell. And that's why he was given this title. That's the reason why he was given this title. So him, amongst other 10 companions, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during their life, he gave them the good news that you are guaranteed paradise. And one amongst them was the great companion, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala. It is stated that he is a Qurayshi, and 7 generations above, his genealogical tree joins with that of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam. So he is actually related to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, but he has to go back through 7 generations. He was born in the city of Makkah Sharif, approximately 2.5 years after the year of the elephant. The leader of the believers, Sayyidina Siddique Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala, is that companion who was the first free man to testify the prophethood of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam amongst the people. He also possesses such noble virtues and excellence that after the honorable prophets, he is the greatest and most highly ranked of all mankind. After the prophets, he is the most greatest and highly ranked of all mankind. Should we not know about this great person? That after the prophet, he is the greatest. Amongst all the freemen, he was the first to embrace Islam. And being a minister and an advisor of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in every decision, in war and in peace. He proved his loyalty and allegiance by supporting the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at every step of his life. It is stated that after a splendid reign of the Khalifa that lasted 2 years and 3 months, he passed away on the 22nd of Jamad al-Ukhra in the 13th al-Hijri. And after spending the blessed Monday, the leader of the believers, Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu, he led the funeral prayer, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu anhu was buried inside the blessed tomb beside the beloved of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever you are fortunate, if you are blessed to go to the beautiful city of Medina, and you go to that place where we are told that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is resting, not only the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is resting, Allahu Akbar. The great lover of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu anhu, is also resting there. And also the second Khalifa of Islam, Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu, is also resting there. Allahu Akbar. Companions in life and companions when they put a curtain between this life and the next. And this is the great personality. This is the person that, as we told there, that he spent all his life, his mission in life. If you were to define his mission was to please his Rabb and please the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there are many, many examples of where he actually sacrificed wealth, was willing to sacrifice his life, put his life in danger, was more concerned about the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam than himself. And in that instance, it showed the true love, because these are the signs of love, that when you love someone, you put them first. You put them first and you put yourself second. And throughout his whole life, he put the priority of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam first. He put his respect first. He put his honor first. He put everything first. He did not care what was happening to him as long as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was safe. Viewers of the channel, we're going to go for a small break now, inshallah, for a small package. Then inshallah, when we come back, we're going to give you, there's many, many examples in the life of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but this particular one is one of my favorites. And inshallah, we're going to share that with you, inshallah, after the break, about the sacrifices and the love that Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu anhu was willing to make. And not only the sacrifices that he made, but also what the companions also made. So let's go to this small break, inshallah, for this small package. And then when we come back, we're going to give you this inshallah. Sallu ala al-Habib, sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
On page 41 of Sawan in Karbala, the 92-page publication, Maktabatul Madina, it is stated, Bukhari and Muslim both report from Sayyidina Abu Musa Ash'ari that the Holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam was ill, and the illness was affecting him strongly. So he said, order Abu Bakr to lead the salah. Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he is soft-hearted. He will not be able to stand in your place to lead the salah. The Holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam said, order Abu Bakr to lead the salah. She again offered the same concern. The Holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam made the same order again with emphasis. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala anhu led the salah during the lifetime of the Holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. This hadith is mutawatir. That means it is mass transmitted, because it has been narrated by Sayyidatuna Aisha, Ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Zamah, Abu Sa'id, Ali bin Abi Talib, Hafsa and others, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'een. The scholars say that this hadith is clear evidence that Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is conclusively more highly ranked than all the companions and the most worthy and capable of khilafah and leadership. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sallam.
Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And mashallah, we heard there of an incident that actually shows the great status of Siddique Akbar radiyallahu anhu. This is the great status. And inshallah, I'm going to share with you an event that took place in the life of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And from this, there are many, many lessons that we can learn. So please, for these few moments, listen to this incident that took place. there's a beautiful book called Siddique Akbar, which has been published by Maktabatul Madina, the publishing house of Dawat Islami. And in that it says that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he requested the blessing companions. He said to them, give me your possessions for sadaqah in the way of Allah. You know, this was probably the first time that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for funds in the way of Allah. Now before I go on, we learn from this that, you know, this is a sunnah of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask people to give in the way of Allah, and also is the sunnah of the companions to give in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And this is, mashallah, one of the beauties of Islam, that people give in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And this is something that we should also continue to do. Now, when the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made this announcement, in obedience to this, the companions, they all rushed forward to give sadaqah from their possessions as much as they could afford. And it stated that Sayyidina Hazrat Usman Ghani radiyallahu ta'ala gave goods of sadaqah for 10,000 mujahideen, and he spent 10,000 dinars on this. Furthermore, saying labbaik upon the saying of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also presented 900 camels and 100 horses with goods on top of them. Now, can you imagine? You know, a camel is an expensive commodity, and it was an expensive commodity. A horse is and was an expensive commodity. And to have it laden with goods and the provisions for 10,000 mujahideen, can you even imagine how much money that is? And nowadays, when we are asked to spend in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla, we think twice. But look, of Sayyidina Hazrat Usman Ghani radiyallahu anhu, that the sacrifices that he made on that day. Now, one of the things that the companions of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to compete with, they used to compete with each other, yes. How did they compete? That's another question, isn't it? Nowadays, how do we compete? We compete with who can have the biggest car, who can have the biggest house. These are our competitions in this dunya. But the companions, their competition was in who can please the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the most. And it stated that on that day, Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu said that I also had possessions. And I thought to myself that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu anhu, surpasses me in these matters every time. Every time something like this happens, he wins. This time, by giving more possessions in sadaqah, I will surpass him. This time I'm going to beat him. This time I'm going to give more in the way of Allah. This time I'm going to please the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the most. Allahu Akbar. So he went to his home and he collected whatever he owned, everything. You can imagine, I want you to for a second think about all your provisions at home, all of your food, all of your clothes, all of the other goods. And what he did is he divided them in two. He divided them in two and he left one part for his family, and the second part he took and he presented to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw this and he said, "O Umar, what have you left for your family?" Allahu Akbar. Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu replied, "O beloved Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I've left half of the possessions of my family. I've left half of whatever I had, I've left half of them to my family." So you can imagine how happy the Muslims were when they saw this great sacrifice that was being made by Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu. Allahu Akbar. But Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu anhu, he has not arrived yet. Allahu Akbar. And when he arrived with his possessions, and he was wearing a simple Kaaba, a coat, which was open from the front, which had buttons that were made of thorns. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was pleased with him, and he asked him the same question. "O Abu Bakr, what have you left for your family?" Allahu Akbar. The beloved asking this from the heart of a true lover who rejoiced with the fragrance of love. He realized once that there was something else, because the beloved knew that it was my true lover, and he sacrificed his life. He was willing to give everything. He was such a true lover of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was willing to give everything in his life. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, "Oh my lover, I know your love. Tell me, what have you brought and what have you left behind?" He said, "I've come to you with all the possessions in my home. And for my family, what have I left for my family? I've left Allah and His Rasul. And that is all that they need." Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu was astonished with this. And he said that I can never ever surpass Amir al-Mu'mineen Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiallahu anhu. That his love, his sacrifices, no matter what, I cannot beat him. I cannot compete with him. I cannot compare with him. The love and the sacrifice that he is making, is willing to make, and is continuing to make, I'll never be able to beat him. In the meantime, the blessed companions saw that the special Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, arrived at the blessed court of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam was dressed in the same cloak, of Sayyidina Siddique Akbar radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "O Jibreel, what are you wearing?" And he humbly said, "Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, today Allah Azza wa Jalla has ordered all of the angels to wear the same clothes as your true lover, Sayyidina Siddique Akbar. And besides this, Allah Azza wa Jalla sends salam to him and asks him, are you pleased with your Rabb?" Upon hearing this, Sayyidina Siddique Akbar radiallahu ta'ala, he became extremely happy and humble at the same time. And he said, "Ya Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala wasallam, how can I be displeased with my Rabb? How can I possibly be displeased with my Rabb?" Then he stated 3 times, "I'm pleased with my Rabb. I'm pleased with my Rabb. I'm pleased with my Rabb." Viewers of Madani Channel, can you even try and picture that event? Can you imagine going to your home and emptying everything out of your home? It is stated that on that day, the reason why he had them thorns in his cloak was on that day, even the buttons in his house he brought and presented them at the feet of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you imagine? Can you even contemplate this? And you know, these were human beings as well. Did he not have a family? Did he not have children? Did he not have wants? Did he not have needs? Did he not have all of these things that me and you want? Did he not want to, like, I've got a cup of tea here, I've got a biscuit. We all have these needs and wants. Did he not have them? Of course he did. Of course he had needs and wants. Did he not have a nafs that was telling him that we want, that you need to have this, you need to have this? Yes, he did. But he overcame that. He controlled that. And he sacrificed that. And that is the message for those viewers of the channel. The sacrifices that he was willing to make. The sacrifices that he was willing to make to please his Rabb. The sacrifices that he was willing to make to please the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And can you imagine how the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt when he was told that I brought everything to you, and for my family I've left Allah and His Rasul, and that is all that they need. Nowadays, when people come to us asking for money for a masjid or a madrasa or whatever it is, any good cause, we think twice. Maybe we'll make an excuse not to give it. We'll find a way of giving the bare minimum. When the Friday prayers are happening and they move the sheet amongst the rows and people are asked to give money, or they move the buckets, we'll look in our pockets for that change that we've been struggling to get rid of, all them coppers that we've not been able to get rid of for a long time. And we can't get rid of them. So we think, you know what, we'll give them to the masjid. Chalo, Jayb Khali, you know, my pocket's empty now, I can sort this out. We're not willing to make any sacrifices. Allahu Akbar. And then we wonder what is happening to us. You know, you may think to yourself, viewers of the channel, that, you know, this money that I've earned, this money that you're asking us to spend, I'm not asking you to spend all your money. I'm not asking you today to do what Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala did. I'm not asking you today to do what Sayyidina Hazrat Usman Ghani radiallahu ta'ala did. I'm not asking you to do what Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiallahu ta'ala did. I'm not asking you to do this. But what I am asking you, what I am making you think about, viewers of the channel, is why are our hearts so cold that we're not willing to spend anything in the way of Allah? Then maybe you say, well, yeah, it's hard-earned money. Yeah, times are hard. Yes, times are hard. Yes, times are hard. But we find time to spend money on a takeaway, to get a burger, to get a pizza, to get all these things. Why do we not have money to spend in this way? It's okay, we can buy £50 trainers, £100 trainers, £200 jackets. But when it comes to spending in the way of Allah, we give £1. When it comes to the Qurbani season, we find the cheapest animal to do it. When it comes to our zakat season, we come up with 1,000 excuses not to pay our zakat. Oh, I can't pay my zakat because this is for her and this, and we make all these excuses. Now, I'm saying to you today that they're excuses. Maybe they are not. But what I want you to do is I want you to get them checked. Go to Darul Iftar and say to them, look, this is my wealth, this is my this is that person's possession, this is the intention that I've kept this money for. What zakat do I have to pay? And whatever they say, then we must do it. Allah Azza wa Jalla has blessed you with money. I'm not asking you to rob a bank to pay in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla. I'm not asking you to steal or to cheat someone to spend in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla. I'm asking you that wealth that Allah Azza wa Jalla has bestowed upon you, that wealth that Allah Azza wa Jalla has bestowed upon you, I'm asking you to spend some of that in the way of Allah. I'm asking you to spend that in the way of Allah. Can we not even do that? And it is through, if whichever country you're here in the UK, alhamdulillah, you look around you. There are many masajid here, many madrasas here, many educational institutes that are here. How did they come about? Through the sacrifices that people made, the money that they spent in the way of Allah. What is my role in that? On the day of judgment, when I am asked that what did you do with the money that you had? What is our answer going to be? I had the best car, the biggest house, land back home, koti. I had all these things. Is that going to be my answer? Or am I going to be able to say that, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Allah Azza wa Jal, I bought a nice house, yes, I bought a nice car, but I still spent in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal. I contributed towards this masjid, to this madrasa, to this water well, to this. I funded this, I tried to assist, I tried to pay towards the running of Madani Channel. These are the things that inshaAllah Azza wa Jal, you will see that true bank balance, that true akhirat bank balance is what you will see on that day. And that's what we need to be wary of. And you can see from here that the sacrifices that the companions were willing to make. You know, we just mentioned 3 companions there. Sayyidina Hazrat Umar Farooq radiyallahu ta'ala, Sayyidina Hazrat Usman Ghani radiyallahu ta'ala, and Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala. And these companions, the sacrifices that they were willing to make. And when we look at ourselves, are we willing to make anything like that? And again, think to yourself, who were these people? They were human beings like me and you. They had wives, they had families, they had kids. Maybe their kids had aspirations of what they wanted to do in the future. Maybe the wives wanted certain things in the house. Yeah, they wanted certain utensils in the house. Like our families now, we want kitchen extensions, we want these food processors, we want all these things. You know, we want all these things in our house. But can we not sacrifice some of that to spend in the way of Allah? Think about it, viewers of the channel. Insha'Allah, we're going to go to the kalam of the day now. And inshallah, when we come back, we're going to continue talking about the special status of Siddique Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala. Let's go to the kalam of the day. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
हर सहाबी नबी जन्नती जन्नती सब सहाबियात भी जन्नती जन्नती हजरत सिद्दीक भी जन्नती जन्नती और उमर फारूक भी जन्नती जन्नती उस्मान गनी जन्नती जन्नती फातिमा और अली जन्नती जन्नती है हसन हुसैन भी जन्नती जन्नती वालिदैन जन्नती जन्नती हर ज़ौजाए नबी जन्नती जन्नती है मुआविया भी जन्नती जन्नती और अबू सुफियान भी जन्नती 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 अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान 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 फिदा का रूही या सिद्दीक फिदा का नफ्सी या उमर फिदा का आईनी या उस्मान फिदा का कल्बी या हैदर जानम फिदाए अहले बैत जानम फिदाए अहले बैत अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान क्यों न हो रुतबा बड़ा अस्हाबो अहले बैत بیت کا کیوں نہ ہو رتبہ بڑا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا مصطفیٰ ان کا خدا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان فدا کا روحی یا صدیق فدا کا نفسی یا عمر فدا کا عینی یا عثمان فدا کا قلبی یا حیدر جانم فدائے اہل بیت جانم فدائے اہل بیت اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان آل و اصحاب نبی سب بادشاہ ہیں بادشاہ میں فقط ادنا گدا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا میری جھولی میں نہ کیوں ہو دو جہاں کی نعمتیں میری جھولی میں نہ کیوں ہو دو جہاں کی نعمتیں میں ہوں منگتا میں گدا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان فدا کا روحی یا صدیق فدا کا نفسی یا عمر فدا کا عینی یا عثمان فدا کا قلبی یا حیدر جانم فدائے اہل بیت جانم فدائے اہل بیت اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان کیوں ہو مایوس ہے فقیر آؤ آ کر لوٹ لو ہے خزانہ بٹ رہا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا فضل رب سے دو جہاں میں کامیابی پائے گا فضل رب سے دو جہاں میں کامیابی پائے گا دل سے جو شیدا ہوا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان فدا کا روحی یا صدیق فدا کا نفسی یا عمر فدا کا عینی یا عثمان فدا کا قلبی یا حیدر جانم فدائے اہل بیت جانم فدائے اہل بیت اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اے خدائے مصطفیٰ ایمان پر ہو خاتمہ مغفرت کر واسطہ اصحاب و اہل بیت کا جینا مرنا ان کی الفت میں ہو یا رب اور ہو جینا مرنا ان کی الفت میں ہو یا رب اور ہو قرب جنت میں عطا اصحاب و اہل بیت کا اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان فدا کا روحی یا صدیق فدا کا نفسی یا عمر فدا کا عینی یا عثمان فدا کا قلبی یا حیدر جانم فدائے اہل بیت جانم فدائے اہل بیت اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان حشر میں مجھ کو شفاعت کی عطا خیرات ہو واسطہ یا مصطفیٰ اصحاب و اہل بیت کا نور والے قبر میری حشر تک روشن رہے نور والے قبر میری حشر تک روشن رہے واسطہ تم کو شاہ اصحاب و اہل بیت کا اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان اصحاب و اہل بیت پر قربان ہماری جان فدا کا روحی یا صدیق فدا کا نفسی یا عمر فدا کا عینی یا عثمان فدا کا قلبی یا حیدر جانم فدائے اہل بیت جانم فدائے اہل بیت अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान, अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान। नज़अ में हसनैन के नाना का जलवा हो नसीब, या इलाही वास्ता अस्हाबो अहले बैत का, दे गुनाहों से नजात और मुत्तकी मुझको बना, या इलाही वास्ता अस्हाबो अहले बैत का, दूर हो दुनिया से मौला ये कोरोना की वबा, या इलाही वास्ता अस्हाबो अहले बैत का, शाह की दुखियारी उम्मत के दुखों को दूर कर, या इलाही वास्ता अस्हाबो अहले बैत का, तंग दस्ती दूर हो और रिज़्क़ में बरकत मिले, या इलाही वास्ता अस्हाबो अहले बैत का, या इलाही शुक्रिया अत्तार को तूने किया, या इलाही शुक्रिया अत्तार को तूने किया, शेर को मिदहत सरा अस्हाबो अहले बैत का, अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान, अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान। फिदा का रूही या सिद्दीक, फिदा का नफ्सी या उमर, फिदा का आईनी या उस्मान, फिदा का कल्बी या हैदर, जानम फिदाए अहले बैत, जानम फिदाए अहले बैत, अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान, अस्हाबो अहले बैत पर कुर्बान हमारी जान।
Sallu alal Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Viewers of Madani Channel, I hope and pray that you enjoyed that as much as we did here in the studio. And I think there was kind of the beginning kalam and then there was a second kalam as well about the fact that our iman should be such that every companion of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in paradise. Har sahabi hi nabi jannati jannati. And then the second part was obviously that we should be willing to sacrifice ourselves, to sacrifice our lives at the feet of the companions of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they were the perfect examples. They were the ones that made all these sacrifices. And have you ever pondered that, the way that, alhamdulillah, the way that Islam has spread all around the world, it is through these sacrifices. The sacrifices that they made. Allahu Akbar. They traveled everywhere around the world. They could have stayed at home. They could have brought up their families like me and you are doing, but no, they made the, I'd say, ultimate sacrifice. Why? To please their Rabb. Why? To spread the deen of Islam. Why? So the message of Islam can get to those that have not heard it before. So that everybody can benefit from the blessings of Islam. And today we see that Islam is in every corner of the globe. It is because of the foundations that were laid down by these great companions. When the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them to go and spread the message of Islam. Allahu Akbar. It is said that only 10,000 companions are buried in Jannat al-Baqi, but there are more than 100,000 companions. Where are all the others? All over the world. They went and spread the deen of Islam. And this is a show of the true love that they had. The sacrifices that they made. But today, viewers on the channel, we're talking about the great Siddique Akbar radiyallahu anhu. And he had so many attributes that which you can see that this small program, 1 hour, I was just thinking to myself, how much can I cover in this program? We cannot fulfill or explain to you the attributes that he had. The real purpose of his life was to have a compassionate relationship with relatives, good manners, destruction of the enemies of Islam, and glory of Islam. And by virtue of his character, he has conveyed the messages to the whole world. Allahu Akbar. That this relationship between an ummati and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what should it be like? The love for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than his desires, more than his wealth, more than his children, more than his relatives, even more than his own life. And he always sustained this love in his heart. As a result to this great sacrifices that he made, the great love that he showed to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself praised him on many occasions. And even there are different verses, viewed the Madani Channel. Yes, different verses of the Holy Quran that are mentioned, that are about the attributes of the great Siddique Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala. I'm going to give you one particular verse of the Quran. It is stated in Surah Al-Lail, part 30, verse 19 to 20. Allah Azza wa Jal says, and I give you the translation, and no one has done a favor to him for which he should be compensated. He desires only to please his Lord, the Supreme, and indeed soon he will be very pleased. With regards to that particular verse, Mufti Muhammad Nimuddin Rahmatullah Ta'ala said that when Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala, he freed the slave Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu ta'ala at a very high price. He paid a high price for him and he freed him. And the unbelievers, they were astonished. And they said that why has Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddique radiyallahu ta'ala paid this much money? Why has he paid so much? Maybe Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu ta'ala did him a favor, and that's why he has bought him by paying a very high price and he's freed him. Maybe he's done this to repay a favor. And upon this, a blessed verse was sent, and it was disclosed that this act of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu was only for the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, and not the return of someone's favor, nor was there any favor of Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu anhu for him. Sayyidina Siddique Akbar radiyallahu anhu freed many slaves after buying them due to them embracing Islam. So Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us though that Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, the sacrifices that he made, he didn't make them to show off to people. He didn't make them because he owed people favors. He did them to please his Rabb. And again, there's another message there. What do we do solely and purely to please our Rabb? And you know, one thing comes to mind. And I pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that when we do this, we do it purely for the pleasure of our Rabb. You know, when you go to the airport, you make many, many journeys. You go to visit family, you go on holidays, you go here, you go there. But that journey to the sacred land, you know, when you're sitting at the airport and you look around you and people are going for business, they're going for family, they're going to visit relatives, they're going for events, for birthdays, for weddings, whatever it is. But that's one journey you make in your life. And I hope and pray that we have the pure intention that that's one journey we're making in our life, purely for the pleasure of our Rabb. And this is what we need to ask ourselves on a day-to-day basis. When we do things, why do we do them? We go to a funeral, why do we go? Do we go to please our Rabb? Do we go to do dua for the deceased? Do we go so that we can contemplate about death and think to ourselves that we are going to be there? Or do we go to please the public? Because if we don't go, oh, he'll be upset. I need to go because I know him. Is this why we are going? And again, we need to ask ourselves why this is happening. So we need to be very wary of this. And here we see that again, the sacrifices that the great Siddique Akbar radiyallahu anhu made, he made purely for the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. On one occasion, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and listen to this. He said, no one's wealth, Allahu Akbar, no one's wealth has benefited me as much as the wealth of Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Allahu Akbar. When Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, he heard this, he started weeping. Because, you know, imagine that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to you and saying to the companions that nobody has benefited more than Allah. So you can imagine what is now the state of Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu's heart. And he was weeping. He was crying and he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are the owner of my life and you are the owner of my wealth. On other occasions, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that the people who had a favor upon us, who have given them in return, but Allah Azza wa Jal will grant the return of Abu Bakr's favor upon him on the day of judgment. Allah, this is the status that he had. Sayyidina Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu has narrated that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Sayyidina Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, that you are my companion by the pond of Kawthar, Allahu Akbar, and the cave of Sahar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. They were companions in this dunya, companions in the resting place, and companions in the akhirat. What a great personality, what a great status this person had, that he is that great person. And what do we know about him? Again, I keep on saying this, what do we know about this person? There's a beautiful book, and I mentioned it at the beginning, Fazan Siddique Akbar. I think it's available just in the Urdu language. Inshallah, it's going to be translated soon. But these are the books that we need to read about these people so that we can be inspired by these people. We can look up to them and be and have this pride inside us that, we were so fortunate to have these people in our rich heritage. And we keep on banging on and saying this, that as Muslims, we don't know about our rich heritage. So we need to know about these great personalities. We're going to take a small break now for a final package, inshallah. And then when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the love and what are the conditions of love? How can we determine what is a lover of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Let's learn from the life of Siddique Akbar radiyallahu anhu. So let's go for this small package, and then when we come back, we'll carry on. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created humans and He divided them into males and females. And He revealed ahkamat to every Prophet alayhi salam, and even to the final Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Now from those ahkamat is that there are certain members of each gender that a person has to keep a distance from. Meaning he cannot speak freely with them, he cannot intermingle with them, he can only speak to them if there is a need. And these are famous categories: maharim, ghair maharim. And we should all learn about who are our maharim, those who we can freely conversate with, sit with, discuss things with, look at, and who are our ghair maharim. Now today, the society and the time we live in, Allahu Akbar, so many things are going on, ma'azallah, where people are speaking freely, openly, even offensively, in an unlawful, lewd way to people of the other gender. This is something that we should be mindful of. The Prophet ﷺ once mentioned that zina is of many types. Fornication. You could have fornication of the hands, and that is to touch something which is forbidden, ana mahram. Zina of the tongue is to speak in that wrong manner. Zina of the eyes is to look at someone unlawfully. So these are things that we have to take into consideration, and we can't just say everyone's doing it and it's all taking place and we join the bandwagon. No. As a Muslim, there are rules that we have to adhere to, and it is these rules that we adhere to and follow that will lead us to the rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah paradise as well. So be very careful, learn Islamic knowledge, and inshallah implement it in your lives as well.
Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. MashaAllah, some beautiful Madri pearls there from Hafiz Kareem Madri, one of our graduates from Jamatul Madina here in the UK. And obviously he was giving us some Shari guidance there. And I think it's very important for all of us to have this basic fard al-ulum, the knowledge that we need to know. And we need to acquire this knowledge. And Dawud Islam is providing them institutes in the forms of Jamatul Madina, is creating the English-speaking scholars. Dawud Islam is providing the weekly ijtimas where you can go and attend and learn the Islamic knowledge. Dawud Islam is providing this Madani Channel in front of you, which again gives you the opportunity of learning this Islamic knowledge. So these are the things that we need to take time out to learn them. Viewers of the channel, today we are talking about Siddique Akbar radiyallahu anhu, the great love that he had for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I only mention a few incidents, but there are so many that time does not permit me to mention many of the incidents that I have in front of me, in fact, that I can mention them. But I want you to, for these few last 8 minutes that we've got of the program, I want to tell you about how we can determine whether a person loves the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We mentioned earlier on that it's part of our iman to do this. Imam Kastalani rahmatullah ta'ala has mentioned the signs of love for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which inshallah we're going to present to you very quickly. Number one, the greatest sign of the love of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to obey him, to act upon his sunnah, to follow his path, to seek guidance from his life, and to abide by his shariat. How can we claim to love? How can we claim to love when we don't listen to him? How can we claim to love when we don't act upon the sunnah? How can we claim to love when we don't follow the path of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How do we claim to love when we don't seek guidance from his life? And how can we claim to love when we don't abide by his shariat? So this is the greatest sign of love. So before we make a claim that we love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ask yourself. I'm not going to ask you to send in the answers. I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, do we? Do we? The next thing he mentioned, be content with the Sharia. One of the signs of loving the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that the one who claims love should be content with the Shariat of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and should not face any hardship in his nafs by the decision of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when it comes to Shariat, if Shariat says this, khalas, I'm happy. I'm happy with whatever Shariat says. It may appear to be difficult, but that is Shariat, end of. And that should be our mindset. Because nowadays we try to find wires around things. Well, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do this? But what about this? What about this? Shariat says this, end of. You know, Alhamdulillah, Dawah Islami is constantly talking about new projects, about new ways in which we can serve the ummah. But every single project, every single idea that comes forward, first and foremost, is it Shariat compliant? Will Shariat allow us to do all the things to fulfill this? Now, there are many, many things that are beneficial to the ummah, that we may say they are beneficial to the ummah, but if they do not follow Shariat, then we stay away from them. So again, being content with the Shariat of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also a sign of the love of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 3, to help the religion of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is one of the signs of loving the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that one should help the religion of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam through his sayings, through his actions. He defend his Shariat and adopt his blessed life in generosity and follow his blessed way of living in the matters of forbearance, endurance, humility, etc. So propagating the deen of Islam, helping the deen of Islam, again, is showing your love for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another way of showing our love, of a sign of the love of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is also we should remain patient in the times of hardship. Because the lover gets such a pleasure by this love that he forgets his hardships. You know, because if you are adopting the Sunnah of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you grow a beard and people take the mick out of you. People criticize you because you're wearing imamah. If you're wearing a beard, people criticize you because you go into the masjid. And maybe make fun of you, maybe it doesn't happen even in this country where people will maybe abuse you. But even if they do abuse you, let's say it does happen in certain cases, it doesn't matter. I'm following the path of my beloved. I'm following the path of the beloved, so it doesn't matter. Whatever hardship I face in life, it is a test from Allah Azza wa Jalla. But I have the love of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in my heart, so what am I worried about? I've got nothing to worry about. Insha'Allah Azza wa Jalla, Allah is with me, then it doesn't matter. This problem that I'm facing, it is a temporary. So having patience is also a way of showing love. And one of the signs of loving the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that the lover should make zikr of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam a lot. Because the one who loves someone talks about him a lot. Some have said love is the name of remembering the beloved forever. A saint has said the zikr of the beloved should be done as much as we have breath. Constantly talking about him, constantly remembering, constantly talking about him and thinking about him. So these are the signs of love, the criterion of love. A person has said for the lover there are 3 signs. Number 1, his kalam. His speech should be the zikr, the remembrance of the beloved. Number 2, in silence, there should be thoughts of the beloved. And number 3, and his practice must be in obedience of the beloved. Allahu Akbar. His kalam should be the zikr of the beloved. In silence, there should be his thoughts of the beloved. And his practice should be in obedience of the beloved. Imam Muhasibi, Rahmatullah Ta'ala, said, the signs of love is to make abundant zikr of the beloved, that to say neither do they stop the zikr, nor do they feel bored about it, nor they feel tired about it, about making zikr of the one that they love. So we need, viewers on the channel, that if we really, really love, and I'll go back to the first one. If we really, really love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we need to follow him. Nowadays, people look up to certain individuals, certain personalities, certain politicians or film stars or whatever, sports stars. And what happens is they try to copy their clothes, copy their fashion, copy the way they cut their hair, copy the clothes that they are wearing. Why? Why are you not copying the person that you love the most? Or is it that you love that person the most? That is your role model in life. Our role model, viewers on the channel, has to be the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And until he becomes our role model in every aspect of our life, and we accept wholeheartedly whatever the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said to us, Whatever the guidance in His Sharia has given us, whatever, until we accept that, we'll always be fighting. We'll always be fighting amongst ourselves. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in his final speech, I give you two things. Follow them, you will never go astray. The Quran and my way. The Shariat and the way of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are what we need to follow. We need to adopt them, accept them. And then insha'Allah azza wa jalla, we'll start to get a taste. We'll get a taste of the love that the companions have. Viewers of my channel, I've got one final request for you. It's coming to the end of the program. Try to read about the lives of our great pious personalities of the past. Try and read about the lives of the companions of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Try and read about the lives of the great Khalifas of Islam. Try and read about the life of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you will realize how fortunate we are, how rich we are, that we have this great rich heritage behind us, this true guidance behind us, and then try and follow in their footsteps. And then insha'Allah azza wa jalla, we'll have the taste of the pleasure of the love of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our hearts. Viewers of Madani Channel, time does not permit me to continue, but you have been watching this program yesterday, today and tomorrow, in which we try to learn from yesterday, learn from our past, so that we can make a change today and have a better tomorrow. Until the next program, keep watching Madani Channel. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
The special favor of Allah. Holy Allah. The universe is the body and its soul. Holy Allah.